Hello, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Anuj, and I'm the moderator for today's exciting event. I would firstly like to thank you for taking the time out to attend this interactive learning power hour session hosted by Harbinger. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, Power Hour is a series of interactive roundtable discussions hosted by Harbinger, where industry stalwarts share their experiences and insights on a particular topic. The topic for today's discussion is e-learning accessibility and creating inclusive learning experiences. So let's begin this exciting Power Hour session with a short introduction video, post which I'll be introducing our host for the day.
Ensure you have selected the right speaker for audio output. Test your speaker to ensure it is working fine from the audio settings option on the lower left corner of your screen. If necessary, dial in using phone.
With that, it's time for the introduction. Our host for today's roundtable discussion is Dr. Vikas Joshi. Dr. Vikas Joshi is a business leader who is passionate about product development and technology entrepreneurship. His mission is to help create software products that make a difference. And a key part of that mission is to inspire tech professionals and entrepreneurs to grow and develop. We welcome you, Vikas, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anuj. And hello, everyone.
Welcome.
We've got a great topic today. And so here's the game plan. We're going to start with accessibility design, what it is and how its scope is evolving and growing. Then we'll get our panel to give us their unique perspectives first. They'll help us understand the business considerations in accessibility. And later, we will discover also the technical and design considerations and the tips and guidelines to create accessible content. These two discussions will include several real-life examples, and specifically, we will share in detail with you the story of a college in the Pacific Northwest, how they strategized and implemented accessible design with Harbinger's help. So does that sound like a plan? And let's get right after it. Let's start with a simple question. Who benefits from accessibility design? Accessibility, for whom? Accessibility design considerations focus on people with disabilities, specifically visually and hearing impaired. Do you agree? I'm curious to learn what you think. You could use the chat window to chat in your response, and I'll keep an eye on that. Well, thank you. We'll go a bit deeper into this question in just a minute, but in the meantime, let me ask you another question. And this is going to be a poll. Are you thinking of designing accessible content? And you have 4 options. Please choose the one that most closely resembles your situation today. I'm sure the answers are coming in. Anuj, how much more time?
Let's give another 10 seconds.
Okay.
Sure. So we'll end the poll and we'll try to showcase the results.
Sure.
So it's up on the screen, I believe.
Yes, indeed. And this is a heartening response. I think a large number of you have embarked upon the journey for compliance support and perhaps aspire to go well beyond what the standards mandate. That's wonderful to know. Thank you for that. So going back to the question that we had on the earlier slide, who benefits from accessibility? Here's some surprising data. As you can see, in the United States, approximately 20% of Americans have at least one disability. And the kinds of disabilities you see here are not just hearing and vision. Those are the first two elements of this chart. But then you also have cognition, mobility, self-care, independent living, or a combination of these. Can you see the broad scope of accessibility concerns here? Here's one more statistic. The American Optometric Association says that beginning in the early to mid 40s, many adults may start to have problems seeing clearly at close distance, especially when reading or working on the computer. And according to the National Eye Institute, everyone sees a color a little differently, even people who are not colorblind. And specifically for men, 1 in 12 is colorblind. That's a surprising statistic, isn't it? So let's go into what is accessibility. The goal of accessibility is for your organization's information and content to reach anyone who needs it, no matter how they access it, visually, through hearing, or other means. What does that mean? One is you need to remain familiar with accessibility standards. And two, you need to be familiar with changing technology, because it's the standards and the technology that together drive how content will be accessed by people who have disabilities. We just now saw the CDC chart, which showed us that 20%, that's 1 in every 5 people have a disability. That's a big chunk of your target audience, and you want them to communicate with you, to do business with you, and to learn. And just what does accessibility involve? There are 4 foundational principles of accessibility. We're going to go over those in a minute and then quickly bring in the panel members. These 4 principles are abbreviated as POUR: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. First, your learner must be able to sense things. For example, if your sentences have important words highlighted in a different color, and the learner cannot distinguish between colors, he or she is just missing on a crucial information. So there is no perception there. Your content is not perceivable. An extreme example is that your lesson content refers to an image that the learner cannot see. You must then have a text alternative so that the screen reader can give a description that the learner can hear. That's perceivability. Operability is equally important. For someone who has motor skills impairment, it is necessary to have keyboard options for navigation, not just mouse clicks. Buttons need to be large enough. And for someone who has cognitive issues, maybe the content should not move too fast. There should be a way to control the pace because they need enough time. Those are the operability concerns. And the third piece is understandability. Now, understandability is easy to understand, but what's important is it applies not just to the content, it applies also to the operation of the user interface. For example, if the navigation actions are predictable, they become easy to understand. The learner knows that clicking in a certain place is going to produce a certain result. That's the understandability of the user interface. The last piece is crucial and interesting. This is the robustness. Accessibility crucially relies on assistive technology. There has to be some piece of technology that makes your content accessible, right? Now, what is assistive technology? Think of screen readers like JAWS or NVDA, or other device-specific assistive features on phones or tablets. I'm sure on many of our cell phones, we see the settings and there are accessibility features in them. These assistive technologies need to use the learning content that we produce and reliably deliver to the learners according to their accessibility preferences. This means the content must be robust and compatible with current and future technologies. That's robustness. The first three principles, as you can see, we have clubbed them together because they focus on the end user. And the last one focuses on the technology that delivers your content to the end user. With this context, it's time now to invite our panelists to join us. And it's my great pleasure to welcome Devon Frame and Shalaka Bhor to the panel today. Devon specializes in delivering consulting and online learning services in the area of diversity, inclusion, and equity. She works with Frame and Associates Consulting. She's based in Vancouver, Canada. Frame and Associates is a Canadian firm that specializes in diversity and respectful workplace online training. Devon brings a creative approach to the design and development of online and in-person training. And she's a business person who is committed to creating inclusive, welcoming, and diverse spaces in organizations. It's an honor to have you here, Devon. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you. And thank you to everyone in the audience as well for tuning in this morning, this evening, whatever time zone you're calling from. Thank you to the Harbinger group for having me today and for discussing this important topic of accessibility. So my name is Devon Frame. I'm the Business Development Manager at Frame and Associates Consulting. So as Dr. Joshi mentioned, we are a Canadian-based boutique consulting firm that specializes in respect in the workplace and diversity, equity, inclusion, online training solutions. We really represent a wide variety of clients, from construction to post-secondary educational institutes to financial institutions. So a really wide range of audience types with a lot of diversity in between them. Two motivating factors that kind of drive our firm's interest in this topic that are a little bit, two very different motivators. The first one being upcoming legislation in Canada. So there's the upcoming Accessibility Act in Canada, as well as the Accessible British Columbia Act. So the first motivation and interest in the topic would be ensuring that our courses are compliant for our clients. This comes into play in the next few years, so ensuring that our firm is proactive rather than reactive, and really ensuring that we're taking the time to transmit our current courses into an accessible format and really use the appropriate resources and deliver a quality product. The second interest for our firm in this topic is ensuring that our e-learning solutions and our e-learning courses are accessible to all users and all learners. We want people to be engaged. We want people to be able to access our courses. Our Respect in the Workplace course is a compliance-based course for a lot of our clients. It deals with a lot of anti-harassment, anti-discrimination. So the idea that a large group of audience and a large group of users wouldn't be able to use that given their disability status just didn't sit right with our team, as one of our core values for our organization is equity and inclusion. So there's two different motivating factors equally important that kind of sparked our initial interest and has carried us through this accessibility project.
Absolutely. Great to have a champion of inclusion to talk about accessibility. That's wonderful. We also have with us Shalaka. Shalaka is the accessibility design consultant who has 12 years of experience in e-learning domain. She works closely with customers to set accessibility implementation and testing guidelines. She has worked on over 30 accessibility projects in the last 4 years, ranging from small to large content projects. Welcome, Shalaka. What makes you interested in this topic?
Thank you, Vikas, for the introduction. You already said about my experience, yes. So accessibility is very interesting topic, and so as per my opinion, I think accessibility benefits all. So let's broaden the scope and talk about disabilities, limitations, and impairment a bit. So permanent are the ones we normally talk about as disabilities, and then there are disabilities due to age. Now let's talk about situational disabilities. Disability due to an accident, pregnancies, for example, someone broke an arm, so that person cannot use mouse to the computer for some time, or someone has ear infection, so it will harm its hearing capacity to a certain extent, right? And then let's talk about some situational limitations. For example, if you're on a bus and want to watch a video, but you forgot you misplaced or forgot your headphones. Now you need closed captions for your video, or you're working on a computer and suddenly your mouse stopped working. And now you have to use keyboards. And now there is some socio-economic aspect as well. For example, if someone is using a really old device with poor internet connection for a website which is not actually optimized for these kind of conditions, so it will result in a poor user experience. So you see, lack of accessibility do affect us all to some degree. So for me, accessibility is no more a feature now. It's a fundamental necessity.
Terrific. Thank you. On that note, then I think we should move right along and ask you, how should decision makers think when they plan for accessibility? Maybe we could start with Devon first. What are some of the things you think about when you launch an accessibility project?
Sure. That's a great question. And what I've often noticed with some decision makers, definitely not all, but there's a bit of a mindset that we're going to be, approaching accessibility through a lens of accommodation. So the idea that we're going to make our content accessible for those who may have a disability. And I would kind of encourage decision makers, Shakla kind of hinted at it as well. I would encourage people to start looking at accessibility through the lens of universal design. Mm-hmm. So when our team was working with the Harbinger group and they had transitioned quite a bit of our content into an accessible format, when our team was going through and demoing our soon-to-be updated courses, a lot of us really appreciated some of the changes, text box fonts made it much easier to read. And while none of us have a visual impairment or any blindness on the team, it really improved the overall user experience. It made it much easier to read and improved the overall product. Mm-hmm. So really approaching it not through the lens of we're trying to help a specific audience, but through the lens of this is going to improve our product overall. And the second factor I would encourage other decision makers on the call to start thinking about is, it is a pretty large field when we talk about accessibility and accessibility support. So as a great starting point, I would start thinking about two key factors. The first one being, what are your local, provincial or state or country specific legislation requirements, and are you meeting those at the moment? So that would be the first thing to consider kind of as a minimum. And the second piece to that is, where is the majority of your audience located? So, for Frame and Associates, we are a majority Canadian client-based firm, or North America. So we really wanted to look at, first and foremost, are we meeting our clients' needs, and are we up to standard throughout North America? Now, if we had a majority of people or majority of e-learning users from Europe, we might want to look differently at the different requirements, and maybe, speak to our user accessibility in Europe rather than looking at a North American focus. So that would just help as a starting point to really bring in and give shape to where you'd like to start, and give you a starting point. Yeah.
Thanks. Thank you. So there's a legislation, and there's also this broader vision of approaching it as good design for everybody, including those who may not have impairments, but they would still appreciate something that is easier to use, easier on the eyes, and so on. Shalaka, what's your take on this? What are some of the things you think about?
I think while making some decisions about accessibility, we should consider mainly 3 points, like audience analysis, the development platform we are selecting, and the level of accessibility support we are looking for. So the user analysis will help us to create the user persona.
Okay, great. And I want to just stop you for one quick second here, because we want to go into some detail of that with you. But I have a separate question from a team perspective. When you have a project you need to get going, and this probably Devon can talk about. If the team does not have adequate prior knowledge of accessibility technologies or standards, is that a consideration? Is that something that's a speed bump?
Yeah, I can speak to that. And just from our team's personal experience, we are experts in respect in the workplace, harassment, discrimination, but we are not experts in, online accessibility and really the software behind it. So that was one of our main decisions to partner with Harbinger, was having a really honest assessment and being realistic about our team's capabilities. So the first step was really becoming aware and understanding what the requirements were, being crystal clear, and then really understanding that no, internally we don't have the capabilities to do that. So partnering with someone who will do a good job and also really knows what they're doing, so you don't have to have a painful experience getting yourself to a quality product.
Perfect. Perfect. And thank you. That sets the context for Shalaka's rest of the answer, because she's talking about some of these considerations, right? So you were describing user analysis and the kind of level of support and the kind of tools you use and so on. So maybe help us talk through that a little.
Yeah, sure. So yes, of course, user analysis will help us to create the user persona, who our audience is, and what their needs are. We also need to consider development platform, whether it is custom HTML5 or an authoring tool. Of course, we do have some liberty with HTML5 development. We can build creative interactivities. Authoring tools do have their own pros and cons, and they also offer accessibility support to a level as per their offering. And lastly, the level of accessibility support we are looking for our products. So WCAG criteria are divided into 3 levels: level A, AA, and AAA. So with level A, we can achieve basic level of web accessibility features. Level AA deals with biggest and most common barriers for differently abled users. And with level 3, level AAA, we can achieve the highest and most complex web accessibility features, but we do have to understand that certain content cannot be meet the level AAA criteria. And Section 5.8 has been revised in 2018, and now it is called as revised Section 5.8, and it is following WCAG 2.0 AA criteria now. So I think based on our needs, we have to consider all these things.
Okay. And then you wanted to talk about the type of support as well, right? The areas where different types of accessibility support is needed.
Yeah, I mean, so WCAG 2.0 do support, it has already covered visual, hearing, motor, and cognitive disability to an extent. But now, so WCAG 2.1 is focusing on mobile technology, low vision, and cognitive disabilities. So we have to consider and the level, so which accessibility compliance guideline and to what level that we are looking the support for, we should go. And of course, the tool we are selecting, the development platform, we have to consider if our content is updating really frequently, so it has to be easy to manage, maintain.
Okay. So with this, then I guess it's time to do some storytelling. So Devon, you recently embarked on your accessibility support journey. So walk us through the journey a little bit. Tell us what happened and what you learned.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually had the pleasure of working with Shalaka a little bit on our transition into accessible content. So I guess what I would talk about people on the call. Some of you may be in different points in your journey, but for our team, just acknowledging that for those of you who may not have a strong online accessibility background, that it can be really overwhelming once you start, where to look, how to begin. And so we kind of touched on it in the last question, but starting from a place of looking at your internal resources, and our team realized very quickly that we didn't have the time, the resources, or really the knowledge to move forward successfully with this project. And that's when we decided to partner with Harbinger, who brought that expertise to our team. A couple of factors kind of played into that. We really wanted to ensure that we had a quality product from the start. And we wanted to ensure that when we were embarking on this journey to transition our courses to an accessible format, that we had done it really well, and we had given the project the respect that it deserves. So I would encourage other people who may be in the starting process of this journey is not to view accessibility as something you can do off the side of your desk, but really carve out adequate time and resources. And what I mean by that is ensure that you are, testing the product adequately in your authoring tools, receiving feedback from a wide variety of departments, not just maybe your learning and development team, but maybe marketing, maybe sales, maybe your tech team, getting different perspective and different eyes on the product, and lots of feedback in order to make it a success. And I would also consider what we've talked about with other groups and other organizations who are on their same journey, and what worked for Freeman Associates was it's a bit overwhelming to start when we've looked at our online products and there's multiple courses to convert to an accessible format. It can be a little overwhelming to say, oh gosh, we've got to start with all of this. And what our team did that worked for us is we started with our Respect in the Workplace course, and we worked on translating those into an accessible format, almost as a pilot. And we learned a lot from those with the Harbinger group, what worked, what didn't. And then from there, we moved through each of our other courses in a timely fashion. That kind of chunking of the work really helped our team not be overwhelmed with providing feedback and kind of getting used to a new look and feel of the course, and allowed us to absorb a lot of the different changes and learn along the way. And what it also did from a sales and marketing perspective is given that our Respect in the Workplace is our compliance course and a majority of our clients have that course, it gave us a marketing opportunity to connect with our clients and say, you know, in the next few years, there's going to be changes to accessibility. And just to let you know, our team is being proactive about that. So that was a really helpful, you know, nice to have addition in terms of this work.
Thank you. Thanks for taking us through that. Of course, I'm sure the audience would have questions now and later. Feel free to chat in your questions. And in the meantime, what we will do is we will turn to another story that we want to tell you about accessibility in higher education. And there are many lessons here that you could potentially apply readily to your work situations. This is a story of one of the largest institutions of higher learning in Washington State. In fact, they are the third largest. And they cater to higher education for more than 37,000 students each year. And they teach degree programs for students entering healthcare professions. So that's the piece we were involved in. They received funding from the US Department of Labor on behalf of a consortium with over a dozen other colleges. And their objective was to upskill the learners on the usage of electronic medical record, EMR systems, and make them career ready for healthcare industry. One important goal of this exercise was to make the program accessible. The challenge was that the curriculum included 54 simulations in show me, let me try formats each. And there were over 70 simulation-based assessments to test the knowledge of learners. How did they go about solving this challenge? You know, it's hard enough to take interactive content and make it accessible. Simulation is an extreme case of interactive content. How did they go about doing that? That's what we're going to learn from Shalaka, who led this major accessibility project. Shalaka, I'd request you not just to walk us through the story, but also to share design guidelines that you applied to this project and maybe some new ones you derived from your learnings in this project and share them with the audience here. So all yours.
So it was a great project and a wonderful success story. We did complete this project within short time with excellent team efforts and skills. Most complex part for any accessibility project is to handle interactive screens. And in this case, it was even more complex as we are handling simulation screens. So let me try and test me screens where the interactive screens for these, along with other knowledge check questions, which are usually the MCQ and MRQ type. And the biggest challenge was to make these screens keyboard operable, especially when we had to put multiple clickable areas or the hotspot on an image and we have to identify their coordinates. We have to display the right error alerts to the users. So our team come up with an interesting solution of using tab to navigate through these clickable areas in the right sequence. And one of the highlight of this project was that for incorrect attempts, proper instructional messages were given to the user so that it will help them to navigate through these complex screens. And we also ensure that we followed best development practices, like we validated our code, HTML code for our framework using W3 standards. We also did a thorough UX review for our navigation panel. And we did test that that can be used without using mouse. The results were that the simulations were successfully piloted by several colleges. We received very good user feedback on these courses. In fact, the federal vendor actually requested that these simulations be demonstrated to numerous grant recipients across the country as a positive example of instructional asset. So for this project, yes, we opt for Harbinger's HTML5 framework because we could see that there is liberty and we can achieve this complex interactions using our framework. So with HTML5, we could set up the markup was well set. We achieved the heading tags, links, purpose, and link identification were there done. We did apply image or text to the relevant images. We have closed captions for the videos. Our course, the courses were keyboard operable without any glitch. And user instructions, so page levels, identification of language, and all that part we did take care of for this project.
Right. Thanks for sharing that. And these guidelines, how did they evolve? Did you find them somewhere, or did you learn along the way? What was the journey like?
So yes, these guidelines do get evolved once WCAG start upgrading, and of course is the learning journey throughout. So finding out whenever there is new requirement, we have to dig in, we have to keep on learning everything, brushing up all the skills, even the team skills, get them trained on the requirement. Even for the developers, they have to upgrade their knowledge about the tools, programmers for the new scripting that is coming in, all the ARIA labels that we have to use properly. That was all there. I mean, it's a learning journey for all the functions that we have to go through.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, there's something about using templates, right? I mean, if you rely on templates a lot, and the templates are not accessible, then your work increases, right? I mean, so that would be one of the things you would be looking for.
Yes, templatized approach do help. So setting up the navigation pane and have well-defined templates with accurate functionality.
Mm-hmm.
It set the user expectations, so the predictability is there. User gets set with the environment, and that's where our templates help. It also speed up the development process a bit.
Great. Anything else you want to share about these guidelines here?
I think we'll be sharing those.
Okay, so that's good to know. So you have these captured in a PDF, right? So if our audience were interested, we could, you could download them from us, or we could email those to you. Well, thank you, Shalaka, and of course, a good recap always helps, and then we can open it out for questions. The conclusion is that every organization needs accessible content, and the 4 principles are perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. The business considerations for accessibility include the audience analysis and tool capabilities, and of course, legislation, and as well, as Devon pointed out, a universality of design. The design considerations are visual, hearing, motor, and cognitive. It's not just visual and hearing. And like Shalaka said, also situational and other types of disabilities. And finally, a clear set of design guidelines and templates is necessary for implementing accessibility at scale. It's one thing to do it for one boutique project, but if you wanted to do hundreds of courses, you definitely need templates and guidelines that you could follow consistently across the large volume of content. So with that, I guess I will thank Devon and Shalaka for their thoughts, and I'll invite again Anuj to take this over and tell us a little bit about how Harbinger could help you in this journey, and then we can open it for Q&A.
Thank you very much, Vikas, and to the panelists. Before we move forward, we have a downloadable PDF for you on accessibility tips. You could see it right on the chat. You could click on that and download it, and we'll also be emailing it to you. So about Harbinger, I would like to share with our viewers that Harbinger Interactive Learning started our journey in the year 1990. Being in the e-learning business for more than 30 years has allowed us to witness the evolution of e-learning. Right from the early 90s, when e-learning was known as CBT or computer-based training. That was a time when, the corporates and enterprises were aiming to cut down on training cost. To fast forward today, after 30 years from when we started, technology now is playing a key role in learning and development. And throughout this journey, Harbinger as a company, we have always strived to lead with innovation in the e-learning space. And that has kind of been our key differentiator. So when we talk about innovation, it could either be incorporating newer software technologies in the e-learning space, for example, using artificial intelligence or virtual reality or augmented reality, etc. Or it could be adopting to latest concepts in the e-learning space, like competency-based learning or experiential learning, etc. So when you work with Harbinger, you will experience our focus on delivering unique learning experiences, and that too by significantly optimizing your training spend. We spoke about templatized approach for bulk development or modernization. So we have certain frameworks and technologies in place that could help you in volume work. So that significantly optimizes your development or training cost, and also help cut down on the development time. Just to brief you about Harbinger, we are a team of 800 professionals, which includes a team of 150 plus e-learning producers. So we are small enough to care and large enough to deliver. Harbinger has dual shore operations in the US and India, and we work with clients across various industries like life sciences, BFSI, EdTech, and also with catalog training providers. We support our clients with end-to-end custom content development, with e-learning modernization and learning technology services and solutions. So that was a short introduction about Harbinger. Let us now move on to the question and answer Q&A session. Viewers, if you have any questions, please do type it in by clicking on the Q&A tab, which you could see at the bottom of your screen. We will await for your questions. We already had a question from Carla. Let me try to access that. In the chat, it was. Yeah, so why do we need to avoid asterisk? That was a question in the chat. So anyone, Shalaka, you would like to take that?
Understanding perspective, the language has to be easy to understand for the cognitive person. And that's where I think this question is from. I hope it follow, yeah.
Sure. We have another question in the chat window again. Viewers, you could just drop it in the Q&A session. That way it's easier for us to monitor. But I'll take up the questions from chat as well. Shalaka, your voice was a little breaking off. Can you please repeat your answer?
Yes, right. Am I audible now? Is this correct?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So I was saying, as per WCAG guidelines, I think the language of the content is important to understand, easy to understand to the users with cognitive disabilities. Hence, we should avoid asterisks.
Okay, got it. Thank you. Another question, can you please explain visual tab orders?
Right, so visual tab order gives a learner the idea where the tab is moving when we press the tab key on the keyboard. So usually it's easy to track with the movement. Some, if there is no visual cue, then user may get lost. So we can track that using, if we like, there are ways to do that. If we are using screen readers, we can do those kind of settings in the screen reader, and we can actually see those highlights coming up with the all the interactive elements when it is moving. Or in the browser itself, in the settings, we can go to the accessibility part of it and enable the visual tab focus, and it will give us it will show us the where our focus is moving. And the idea behind that is the tab focus has to move in a logical order, the way our content is flowing, and not just to jump randomly to the places which will not make sense to the user.
Thank you. Another question, what is the typical turnaround time for creating a 30-minute level 2 accessible e-learning course? So the audience, Michelle might be meaning about the time to develop a 30-minute accessible course.
We have to consider the aspects as well. I mean, of course, 30-minute is the duration. Are we what platform we are considering? What is the complexity level? I mean, level 1, 2, 3. The type of interactions that we are thinking of. Is our course is text heavy, audio heavy, graphics heavy? We all have to consider that, because based on that, the implementation of accessibility criteria will get added on. Am I making sense? I mean, there is no specific, we cannot say, okay, 30-minute course can be developed in this particular of time frame. It's, of course,
right.
It's very simple course, then turnaround time can be less, but it is interactive, highly engaging, then
Right.
it will take a good
And just to add to Shalaka, when it comes to working with Harbinger, we have a huge resource pool. So we have enough resources from a delivery perspective, to cater to any work. I mean, if it's a 30-minute course, we could get it done in a short period of time as well. So yeah. Just let me look at a few more questions. Shalaka, would you repeat what you mentioned about how you handled links in the training to make it accessible?
Right. So usually when there is a link, there has to have a visual cue. For the norm, in a general perspective, the links has to be presented differently from the other on-screen text. That's first. And we should generally not use the word link or click here, which usually don't specify anything for it. I mean, just consider people who cannot see so this text, this link, click here, will not make any sense. So that's where we should have the description of the link, what is the destination of that link, when user will click, where it will take user to. That has to be addressed.
Okay, great. Devon, a question for you. How did you train your team members for accessibility, so that they could showcase it to the end customers? You mentioned that it helped you in marketing, but if you could share, your experience and how you trained your team members to showcase it to the end customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might be different depending on the team, but we have somewhat of a smaller team, so we involve them kind of in the design process where it was appropriate. So when we had weekly updates with the Harbinger group, we would keep our team brief. So each step in the process, our marketing team was familiar with, so that when they did go out to talk to clients and clients had specific questions about the differences in the accessibility standards or the differences in, why now, our team was very well versed in the process from start to finish. So we found that very helpful. And then if there's a limitation, so if you have a very large team and that might not be possible or might not make sense, I would suggest having quarterly briefings on the accessibility and what your product or e-learning service, what the changes are and key points to know. It can be anywhere from half an hour to 45 minutes, but I would just suggest keeping that as a training objective for your marketing and sales team, and really just bringing it up consistently, especially if it's a new topic for your team.
Great, great. Thank you for sharing that, Devon. Shalaka, if you could take up another question, do you think accessibility is different for children versus adults?
No,
So, do you think about accessibility differently for children versus adults?
no. Accessibility guidelines doesn't discriminate between the age group or the people. These are universal, so it applies universally to everyone.
Got it. Got it. Thank you. Devon, another question for you. How did you ensure the courses delivered were meeting the required standards?
We partnered with Harbinger Group partly to help ensure they were up to accessibility standards, but at least for the Canadian legislation, Ontario is a province that has very clear guidelines, which are going to be likely the base for the rest of Canada and for BC's accessibility standards. So we partnered with Harbinger, but also had a lot of case studies from Ontario in order to ensure our product was up to standard, and not just up to standard, but also up to industry standard. So what other people were doing with their e-learning in Canada, we wanted to ensure that our product was along the same lines. So it might be worthwhile others in learning and development in a specific industry. You may want to explore what other organizations are doing, what they're doing well, and what you might want to improve on in terms of accessibility.
Great, great. Shalaka, another question we have from Amy. How do you make an accessible e-learning interactive?
I'm sorry, can you please repeat the question?
Sure. How do you make an accessible e-learning interactive? So can an accessible course be equally interactive?
Yes, quite possible. I mean, let's look at the content. If it is too text heavy, we can make beautiful interactions of it, in which we can obviously make keyboard operable, have the right color contrast to it. And so there are options, click and reveal, or have so accordion, or the questions. In that way, a simple text can also be converted into a beautiful interactive content.
Okay, got it. Let me check if we have any more questions. Devon, a question for you is: adding accessibility to existing course a good idea, or should we think of complete redesign of a course? I mean, Shalaka, you could also take this up. Maybe we'll wait for Devon's answer.
It kind of piggybacks on the last question, but for us, given the content, it didn't make sense to start fresh. And so that might be a different business decision for different decision makers. But for us, it didn't make sense to start from scratch. It really made sense to build on what we had. For our course, we had a lot of drag and drop. So we switched that interactive element to click and reveal, which improved the product overall, especially from an accessibility standpoint. But I would say it would depend on the length of your course. If it's a 1 or 2 module, 5-minute course, and it might be easier for you to start from scratch. But for us, it was a 60-minute, multi-level, multi-tiered course, and starting from scratch just wasn't an option.
Great. Shalaka, your take?
Yes, I think when we have already developed content in front of us, and when we want to make it accessible, we have to consider the points like, first of all, of course, the platform where the product is built. Then let's look at the file structure of it, the master slides, and identify the templates which are supporting accessibility guidelines. Find out the interactivity which are not supported, then bring in the instructional approach, convert those interactions into the supported ones, update the instructions for all the interactives which are relevant, relook at the content, not for the redevelopment, but chunk it logically, or at all if required, split it into right chunks, have the page levels. We should also look at the navigation panel. I mean, it has to be consistent, global. Look at the template designs, color contrast. It has to be a right way. Your master slides has to be designed in a way where we can set up all the guidelines and then it will fall in place. So not really change the entire look and feel of the output, but at the same time make it consistent and compliant with the guidelines.
Okay, great. So that brings us to end of questions. Viewers, we have included the LinkedIn profiles of Devon and Shalaka in the chat. So you could, reach out to them directly as well, connect with them on LinkedIn as well. You're welcome to do that. If you have any more questions or would like to have, one-on-one discussion with Harbinger and our team of experts on interactivity, you could just write to us at info@harbingerlearning.com. That pretty much brings us to the end of today's session. Once again, thank you so much, Vikas, Devon and Shalaka, for your time. I'm pretty sure that this was an informative session, and we have some food for thought, going back from this session. We'll be sharing the downloadable PDF with all our attendees through email as well. And we'll also be sharing meeting recordings, with the attendees after we have it ready. So thank you so much once again. Wish you all a pleasant day, pleasant evening ahead, and take care from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.